Hi, I'm Evelyn.
I'm Alexis.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Anna.
We are the Marmalade Mermaids. This week, our flag means compassion. Season 2, Episode 6, Calypso's Birthday.
So when it comes to compassion, I always get it kind of mixed up or utilize like the same definition as being empathy. So I had to look it up and really quick. Empathy is basically feeling one's feelings. Uh and compassion is not necessarily has to be like you also feel the other person's feelings, but it's more so the biggest difference is having the desire to alleviate like distress or of other people's feelings. And the story that I think about when the I had a hard time honestly thinking of a story, but I I whenever I think about someone who's compassionate, I think about my mom, and she's the one who kind of helped me learn and understand, even though I would consider her kind of a cold person when it comes to the more sensitive emotions. She's not really good at verbalizing it, or like, no, more so verbalizing it. She's good at showing it and everything everywhere else, but um she simply to say, like, I remember I she's not good at saying I love you, and and she's also not like, I've learned recently she's not a huggy, like she doesn't like hugs. So I did not realize that for the longest time, but I do realize that she is a quite actually a compassionate person. She's very sweet and cares about a lot of people, and I've she definitely is better. She was better at like being compassionate to my brother before he passed away, and to my dad, who's kind of a difficult person to who's just generally a difficult person, but she's just kind of helped me be better about it. But one of the I want like there's a person in my life, and I really learned how to be kind of like, I'd say, compassionate with her. Originally at first was someone I found kind of difficult to work with, and I didn't understand a lot of like her thought process of things, and it was just at first like really just hard to like to not to dis like to not to try to not be so frustrated with her until how I usually kind of worked with her, I was just like, I'm just gonna go with the nice route. I'm just gonna be nice and everything, even though I find her really frustrated, but I'm just going to just shush that part of me and everything, because I have to work with her and I don't want to deal with tension. I'd rather not deal with like a tension, but through that, she decided to open up to me about a lot of her like history, her past and stuff. And one of the biggest things was that she had a pretty serious like brain injury, and she had to go through a lot of like surgery through it. And she had explained to me as well, like that kind of changed a lot of like things. She has one comment that was interesting was that one of her daughters had said that like her personality has kind of changed, and made me more understanding of like her situation, made it a lot more easier to actually start liking her and seeing her as a person who she was, because she was a very like, going past like a lot of her frustrations, she was actually a very sweet woman. Like she really cares, and it just made it a lot easier to really like her. And so what was sad was that because of all these frustrations, her like forgetfulness and her just really mixed thoughts and stuff, because her mixed thoughts would turn her into like, she would get things a little bit confused and get really angry and frustrated, like really angry. And so my I had come to accept that like this is just kind of unfortunately how her brain operates now due to that like injury. And I had decided to like I'm just going to help her out by trying to be a supportive person and like talk to her like through the things, like explain to her I'm like, hey, this I know you're really upset with this person or so and so, but it's you did get it confused and everything. And, you know, this is how they feel about what you're saying. Kind of like try to really help her um through a lot of the problems that she had because it's not really her fault. That's just kind of how she works. So when it came to compassion, like I feel like it's when it comes to like being a compassionate person, I always kind of feel like try to learning from my mom, just kind of trying to understand. I think it comes with trying to understand like how someone is or something like that, like give them kind of a chance or so and like try to see the other better quality, like the good qualities that they have. And instead of like letting the negative things kind of basically ruin it all, and always trying to seek the good qualities and try to work with that and try to be, you know, try to be their friend or try to like them for who they are for those other things. Because sometimes like I don't know, like I when it comes to my dad, like it's that is like a it's always just been kind of a work in progress for me. Just trying to be understanding that a lot of his childhood trauma has kind of formed him into the person he is today without getting any of the help that he should have gotten in trying to navigate those feelings. And now it's just kind of made him who he is, and just try to be understanding and loving and uh all but that it in a way it's just I think it has kind of helped our relationship with trying to um not let the negative bits about him um really really make me like push him away. Just letting a lot of like reminding that like he actually loves me, like I know he loves me even though he shows it in like in a different way. I try to like I try to realize that he is a loving person, and although I do get really angry at him, it's better off that I just try to love him all who he is. But yeah, I had a hard time with the story with compassion, but I always think like my mom is a compassionate person because of how she I just learned like from her just trying to find that good part of a person, good like the good parts of the person, and taking that and then trying to work through with the negative parts with the person, trying to work with them and help traverse that whole thing, because sometimes that's unfortunately just gets like in the way, and it makes them doesn't seem like that great of a person, but that's not all of who they are. That's my story.
That's a
Cute.
very compassionate way to look.
Yeah.
It reminds me very much of like Mr. Rogers saying like there's not a person that you wouldn't love if you knew their story.
Mm-hmm.
And just like, yeah, if you really knew that, you could put yourself in their shoes and see their situation. That's a compassionate way to be. All right, let's remember what happens in the episode.
Ned is upset with Blackbeard because Blackbeard broke his record of Ned playing the violin, and apparently it was really good. The crew aboard the Revenge is bored, so they decide to throw a party for Calypso. And Ed is feeling bad about his pirate treasure, so Steed suggests he turn it poison into positivity. And Ed decides to pay for Calypso's party as well as use his money for other good things. Wee John dresses up as Calypso and Izzy sings La Vie en Rose. Ned's crew comes aboard the Revenge during Calypso's party and they start to torture the crew. Black Pete and Lucius come out from celebrating their engagement and they go to rescue the crew. But simultaneously, Steed has a conversation with Hellcat Maggie, who's like, yeah, we're going to go with you. Forget Ned. And the whole crew turns on Ned, and Ned has to go off a plank. And his crew sails away with some of the pirate treasure, and Blackbeard and Steed get together.
Ooh.
Well
Okay.
done. Whew, that was very well done. All right. So compassion in this episode. Katie, I have in my notes that you're going to start our discussion. Do you
Sure.
want to say where you saw compassion?
One of the like easiest where I saw some compassion was Black Pete and Lucius. They're kind of oblivious to any situation of need of the crew. And when they come out, they hear the crew like starting to be tortured and they know that something's a little bit afoot. And there's some wavering on, do we want to go help? Do we not want to go help? And they decide that they want to help. So I think that putting yourself, your needs kind of on hold to in a way that you can help somebody else, and to like sacrifice something to help somebody else is a compassionate act. So there was their first act of compassion that really stuck out to me. But there are other acts of compassion as we watched the episode that I saw more and more. And I felt like, in contrast, it was very interesting that Ned seemed to desire compassion from other people. Like he wanted other people to feel how hurt he was. He liked torturing people so that he could hear their scream music, which is a weird fetish. And it feels like no matter what he did, because of maybe the way he did it or the way he told his story, nobody was really compassionate towards him. So I liked in your story, Evelyn, how you brought up that compassion is kind of accepting the whole situation and the whole person. It's like, in totality, I'm still here with you. And there was nobody there for Ned. And in conversation and in watching it multiple times, the realization was that maybe Ned made people keep suffering and wanted to keep torturing people because he wanted compassion so much. But he's not a character that's really offered any compassion throughout the episode. What else did we see?
I like that you mentioned, Evelyn, that it was something that you kind of get confused with empathy because, there's just some defining things there. So looking at the meanings, we look to see that it's suffering with or a deep sorrow or a deep tenderness for someone who's suffering. And there's an element of wanting to relieve their misfortune or relieve their suffering. And I saw some little ways. The things that I saw Ed do when he gives the kids the money, I thought he's seeing in them what his life was like and his suffering, so he understood their suffering and he wants to alleviate that. Or when
And to tell them to not be pirates. Like he wants to alleviate like that suffering that he can infer that's probably happening, but also like the little kid has like a little parrot on his shoulder and he's like, nope, we're not pirates, don't become pirates, like don't choose this life. So that's
in a protective way, like he's trying to look out for him because he wants his life to be better. Then when Ed's they get tortured, Steed and Ed, and Ed's like, no, don't torture him, choose me, and like I'm the one you want. I thought that as an act of compassion. And then at the end, when he sees Steed is kind of in a bad place, like having just made him fall off the plank, while everyone's like, just give him, and he's like, I'm gonna go see how he is. Like, I'm gonna go try to alleviate his suffering and make it better. So those were some like right there on the nose ways that I saw Ed be compassionate in this episode.
One of the other ones that I kind of noticed is that I think Captain, I can't remember the English name that was used, but Zhang Yi Zhao, I feel like she uses a compassion like tactic to like win over people. So it's all like, yeah, I know that you're kind of dealing with this trouble. Here's a solution. I know and understand, and here you go. I have like a solution that I can give to you. And everything. Like I really saw that when she was talking to our what's his name? What's his no-nos? With
Ricky.
yes. And how I think there was definitely like there was probably a little conversation between her and Auntie about like, this is how we're going to talk to him. It's like, highlight this issue or something that he has. And so like, oh, don't do that. Like don't say things like that. Like, we're not going to talk about that. Understand what you're going through and everything. So here is I'm someone that's willing. I'm a very kind person that can, hear, understand your issues, and I also can help you. And I thought
Yeah,
that was fun.
your story kind of reminded me of that instance where she's like, let's not pile on, right?
Mhm.
And like you're trying to understand your coworker and have a little, it's not so much that you wanted to relieve her suffering in like a real life kind of way. It's just you didn't want to add on,
Yeah.
right? I'd
Yeah.
like to make your work environment a little nicer place. I don't want to add
Mhm.
on to yourself.
Although I really liked this episode, I feel like it's hard, besides like some obvious ones. I'm like, this is kind of difficult.
Well, I think Calypso's birthday is an act of compassion. Like I think
Mhm.
um that like really early on, Steed is told like this is just like a not real thing.
Been
And
calypsoed.
Steed is like Steed likes a bit of whimsy, right? But he
Mhm.
also, I think it was compassionate to be like, yeah, they're a little bored. We've all had a really hard time. Blackbeard just stopped wearing the cat bell around his neck and dressing in like a burlap bag. So let's, have some fun. And I think that that's an interesting form of compassion to have like dancing and music and food and fireworks and, like uh, j- not a form of escapism, but kind of it's just a nice gesture.
Turn poison into positivity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think that was another major thing in this episode. And that can be, yeah, like I'm trying to take this not great thing and not have it cause suffering, and let's alleviate that and have something positive come out of it. That's really sweet. I was also thinking about it feels like compassion has a lot to do with your inside motivation and the reason why. Uh, like, is it genuinely because you see this person and you want to relieve their suffering, or maybe something else? Like maybe Jen is just a little more into like, hey, I'm gonna act in a compassionate way so that I can kind of get what I want.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or is
Get
it
more
like,
flies with honey than vinegar. Yeah.
say that again?
Get more flies with honey than vinegar.
Right.
It's
And
gonna
it's a strategic thing. Yeah. And yeah, like sociopaths who don't have natural empathy can learn to act in an empathetic way, or can act in a way that is kind, because they know it's going to be better for everyone and them in the long run. Like having a
exactly.
positive relationship uh, is going to pay off, even if maybe in my heart I'm not really compassionate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's interesting where you're wondering, does compassion have to be something where you're not asking for anything in return? Is that something that makes it compassionate? Um, so in the beginning of the episode, Ed and Izzy have a quick little exchange that's kind of breaking the ice. And I think Ed is kind of like a petulant teenager, and he just says, like, sorry about your leg. And rather than Izzy just being like, that's all, he instead is very compassionate towards Ed and takes it with a lot of grace. And when Anna and I were talking about it, when Izzy sings La Vie en Rose, he's celebrating Ed and where Ed is in his life, and like coming to a realization that he doesn't need to be Blackbeard, and that he's happy that Ed is in love, and that he accepts his apology. And I think that that's a really beautiful way to be compassionate, is because it's not a big conversation. It's not putting blame back and forth on people. It's just taking a situation for what it is, loving the people in the situation, and letting it go.
Yeah, and I like that idea of not expecting anything in return.
Well, and it reminds me a little bit of that like Princess Bride thing. When it was, he's like, as you wish. Like every time I was saying that and doing things for you, I was telling you I love you. Like sometimes we have compassionate acts that can mean something different to the other person. So to just be aware of those things, that sometimes actions and gestures can speak a lot.
We were thinking about the beginning of like Ned Lowe and his, perhaps like he's looking for compassion. Perhaps he wants people to understand. Like, I feel like he's maybe trying to compel people. And I was wondering, just a question I had is, can you compel compassion in others? And if I was to guess, just based on Ned, I'd say probably not. And for his crew, that like suffering and the torture has become kind of commonplace. I wonder, could compassion become commonplace? Or because I think a really remarkable moment in this is where like Steed is genuinely listening to Hellcat Maggie and to the whole crew. And you could tell that that's his MO. Like it's genuine. It's not just a manipulation. He really is a caring person. And it makes a really big difference and turns the whole crew against their captain. I'm going to pause there. I don't know what else, but that's a good moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think an indicator of how genuine that is not just Maggie's reaction, but later on when they give the crew Ned's boat and some money, and like their parting comments are like, take care of your mom, I hope she gets better, and like that exchange happens. And then the way Maggie decides to run the crew, because she seems like kind of the new natural leader now, but she's like, let's talk about profit sharing. Like, how are we gonna, like a kind of a democratic, compassionate way to rule if you, as a pirate captain, whatever that means.
Yeah, it feels like she just wanted a little recognition. She just wanted a little positive reinforcement, and she's going to be the one to now provide that.
It's weird, though, to kind of think about Zhang and Ricky's conversation. And like, is that a strategic form of compassion? And can you do that? Because we know that, like, sorry, we are a show that does spoilers. So if you haven't watched the show yet, we know that the whole time when Ricky's negotiating with Zhang, he's putting those clocks on all the ships that are bombs that are going to explode. So I don't know if like that is a form of compassion, or if it's just like you were saying, strategic to be nice and kind to people because they're more cooperative and compliant. And because Ricky's being kind back, but he's doing it for the purpose of like ending piracy in his mind. But she gave him a really nice nose.
It does look great.
And she didn't out him.
Did the bomb thing already happen?
Mm-mm.
That's coming up. Okay. I'm just the one who's remembering things out of order. Okay. Cut that out.
She does the little exchange, then the grandfather clock shows up in her office and she's like, "What is this from?" And they're like, "It's from Ricky." And then all the
Yeah.
pirate ships we see have these, everybody that's aligned with Zhang has these grandfather clocks.
Yeah, I remember that
Um,
moment saved Steed because they're fighting, and then like that's the moment that saves Steed from Jang. Okay.
I think it's really sweet that Fang is like, his concern is for the little goat, like that can't defend itself. And he's like, I just knew they were gonna kill him. So he just like holds the little goat over the side of the ship. That's just so sweet.
All right. Any other compassion things?
I like that. I think Steed's like way of being compassionate, and like I think that's just simply sometimes is that listening to people. That's just what kind of like all they need is to. I don't know. We see that with Vincent, right? Vincent was, they obviously had a conversation, and it seems like Vincent was very appreciative of like
Yeah.
kind of that act, that like act of kindness of just talk, let's talk it as a crew and everything. I think that's one way of like being compassionate, is allowing someone to talk about their thoughts and feelings on things, like because they want to be heard. And I like that's Steed's way of being compassionate to people.
And thinking of that with like we saw with Ned's crew, this is just the way things are, and they get kind of same old, same old. But I could see that also with Steed. Like it's been so long that their crew has been like, we talk it through as a crew, that in a lot of ways that has kind of become their MO. And that's like it even infects Izzy to some extent. Like we even heard him say, like, I think we should probably talk this through to Ed, which didn't actually go very well. But it's like it's something that has been an influence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and just like how important communication is in having a healthy relationship. Not that I know that any pirate crew was ever really interested in that, but I like this in the story. Another really important point that Anna brought up was when Ned is on the plank, and like when Steed decides like, nope, you're going over, dude, and throws the violin. The thoughts that Steed has is seeing his younger self, and it's really a moment of compassion for himself as a child and as a person who's kind of gone through some really traumatic and difficult things, and having that self-compassion. I didn't say that as well as she would have, but I thought that was a great point.
A little self-compassion is important, especially for your younger self who was in a bad situation, and you don't know how to handle your mean dad. That's yeah.
Yeah. Or the boys calling me baby bonnet.
Yeah. I did think in that moment when he is makes the decision, he's like, oh no, you're down. Like I feel like they're kind of Ed and Steed are coming to more even ground, where maybe at first they were very, very different, and they're kind of sharing some qualities, and Ed is becoming a little bit more Steed like, and Steed is becoming a little more Ed like. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about what Evelyn was talking about, this understanding of the suffering of the other person and wanting to alleviate it. And I think considering what we're, the conversation about, is it strategic? Is it compelling the other person? I think for me, what I see as an act of true compassion is it's about what the other person needs. And there's nothing that's about you, about what you're trying to get from it or gain from it. So looking at Zhang or Ned, where on the surface, there could be some performance of compassion or an expectation of compassion, or like wanting to be someone to suffer with you as an element of compassion. I don't think for me, that really makes it compassion. It's more about what is needed by what does the other person need in this moment? And the compassion part, I think, is meeting that need, even though maybe it's, again, like not quite what you really want to do. I think Evelyn's example with her coworker is great, where it's sort of like, like if I could just do what I want to, I kind of was just like not deal with this person, or kind of just like treat her like the other coworkers, but saying like, no, I'm going to try and understand where she's coming from, what she's trying to express, maybe why she's expressing it that way. Or similar, like, with her dad, of trying to kind of, again, figure out, again, really getting into the other person's experience. And the words that came to mind for me were deep tenderness and deep awareness, because I saw both of those words used in description of compassion. So anyway, that just makes me think about where did I see it in places that maybe were surprising for me. And so there's something, and I don't have the thought fully formed, but the thought came to me this morning of there's something in the way Jim interacts as kind of like watching Archie tell the story about the snake and then the crew's reaction to the story. And Jim just has this amazing expression where they're like, I'm smiling because Archie's enjoying the story, but I'm also like side-eyeing with my crewmates of like, I have no idea what she's doing. And I think I don't know if you can call it compassion, but I think it's this really great moment of Jim having compassion for Archie. Like you're telling this really cool story and you want to have like, people really involved with it, but then also the crew hearing it and being like, what is she talking about? And Jim being like, I know, I don't understand either. I just think that's a really lovely example of how compassion can just be these really subtle things where it's just seeing the other person or recognizing what the other person is trying to express or trying to get across. And I think that happens a lot in this episode where they talk about like, I see you, or like, oh, you're not really seeing her. Like you don't see Hellcat Maggie. So I thought that was interesting. And then the other aspect of compassion, I think, is this like having compassion for yourself and the inner self that kind of needs to express stuff. And so for me, I think that there's something in Wee John having compassion for this person inside of him who wants to come out, that wants to have this full expression as Calypso, and to just being like, I'm just working on my look, and just kind of like, I need drama here and I need drama there. And so again, like I think it's a really beautiful example of Wee John having compassion for this part of himself that's like, this is who I am and this is how I want to be seen and this is how I want to express myself, which I think is just really lovely, because that then helps Izzy also maybe try out. Like, what if you had, again, this sympathetic understanding for this part of you that maybe is kind of scary to express? I don't know. So those are my thoughts that I think, yeah, I don't know. Again, you could say it's textbook compassion, but I think there's an element of compassion in those actions.
Thank you. I love that.
Yeah. A little bit of trivia. Did you guys know that the actor of Lee John used to be a drag queen? Used to perform as a drag queen?
For sure.
I didn't know that, and I was so excited.
I knew that he DJ'd. I didn't know that he
Yeah, he did it
that.
as DJ Revlon.
Oh, okay. His DJ
Yeah.
gigs were in drag. Oh, that's neat.
That's lovely.
So it just made me more appreciate him turning into Calypso more, because he was all like, oh, he is just reliving this also in real life kind of thing. I love it.
Well, and maybe that speaks to the show makers giving people a chance to do what they love and what they're good at. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's so good.
Well,
Yeah.
and Con O'Neill, like him singing. Sorry, what were we gonna say, Anna?
You go ahead.
Oh, I just think that that's another example that Con O'Neill, like he has a really good voice and he's a trained singer. And for him to sing in this episode is another example of like the show just giving the actors an opportunity to express themselves. And that is like cool insight.
But maybe I want to express myself with singing. I was trying to do my Swede. When he
That
wants
was pretty
to.
good.
Mhm. All right, are we ready to pick a line?
Well, I think Anna had something.
Oh,
It's again not very connected. It had something to do with Evelyn's thought of pulling on the strengths of, guess, of the actors themselves, was thinking about the characters doing the same thing of just trying to be like, well, this is what's important to me, so maybe this is what, you know, I could do. And it just made me think of that moment where Steve's trying to help Ed think of what to do with his money, and he's like, you could buy clothes. Like, that's a Steve thing. Like, that's what Steve would do if he's like, this is what would make me feel better. But then I love that he keeps trying to offer other things, like maybe you could do this, and then, you know, turning into taking care of the crew. But again, I just love that there's this little moment of Steve, again, like in compassion, like you just always start with like, what would I want? That's how I think of compassion. Like, what do I need in this minute? What do I need in this moment? And I think I always sometimes will start with that when I'm trying to offer something to someone. And I think through practice and getting to know the person better, I can understand like what actually is important to them. Similar to, like, you know, the show runner and the writers kind of being like, oh, well, what is the crew, you know, there's the crew, what are the actors bringing to the table that maybe we could incorporate into our story? I think that's a big part of compassion. It's not, again, it's not about it's not about you. It really shouldn't be about you. It should be really like, how do you amplify and pull the spotlight on the other person? And again, ultimately have this expression of care for who they are, like, and the person that they want to be.
Yeah, that reminds me of like the step from empathy is like understanding and like, I feel it because that's how I would feel. And like, yeah, it's like, well, if I were in this situation, I would da 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 da, or I would want. And then to kind of, yeah, it starts by putting yourself in their shoes and then letting them have what really is going to be helpful for them. That's great.
Right, which makes me think of Fang and the goat. Like, is it the goat that needs to hide, or is it Fang who's like, oh, it's for the goat? Like, I need to make sure the goat's, you know? And in that, you're taking care of the goat and keeping the goat safe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and the goat has had a lot to drink at that point.
Well, and I do think that there's something very human in Fang wanting to take care of the goat. And I say this frequently, but in the United States, the first child abuse cases were actually under animal abuse. There is something very human, especially in our culture, that says, no, we take care of animals and we expect you to treat animals to a certain amount of care. And at the time, our country had laws on the books that said how it was acceptable to treat animals, but not how it was acceptable to treat children. And maybe that's because children generally are able to have a voice in that they can say words, even if their voice isn't powerful. So I know that's kind of a downer idea, but it's something that I see and say, like, who are like the most innocent in the situation? Who are the voiceless in the situation? And I think that Fang probably doesn't want the goat for his own reasons to be sacrificed, but there is something to looking out into the environment and saying, who doesn't have a voice here and that I need to step up and protect.
Yeah, and I think that's what Steve does with Hellcat Maggie.
Yeah.
Kind of like, hey, like this, like you're not seeing her as a person, you know? And then, you know, she's telling him, he's like, oh, that's a lovely name. And she's like, oh, like you can see her like smile and like light up. And so I think that's the thing of people getting just ground down in the culture that they live in and the expectations that are given to them and the ways that they're allowed to express themselves or not express themselves. And I think all those expectations are really wrapped up in this idea of the culture of being a pirate, which the show is exploring. And so I think a huge act of compassion in general is letting people have a different voice and let them have a choice, I think, in those expressions and having them validated by other people. I think that's the other thing is, you know, there's this expression of compassion when the crew sees Wee John coming out as Calypso and they're like, whoa, like it's Calypso, you know. And then Izzy is singing for Ed and Steve, and Izzy also then sings directly to Calypso, you know, and kisses the hand. And again, like making this performance. So again, like I think you're right, it's about not buying into, but it's helping create a new experience, a new world with someone else. I think that is a really important act of compassion. Like, this is where you are now and there's suffering or something that's uncomfortable or not right about it. But then I think like compassion can be this maybe equitable choice about making sure that everyone is getting what they need, but people need different things. And so sometimes it's hiding, and sometimes it's like, I need to have a party, and sometimes it's fireworks, and, you know, sometimes it's all the things. But I think Ned's different because Ned's like, I'm going to make you experience what I want, what I think needs to be expressed. And again, he stopped seeing people completely, which I think is just in contrast with Steed, who Steed does nothing but try to understand and see people.
think we did a really good job with that.
Yeah.
It might not have been obvious, but there's a lot of compassion there when you deep dive.
And that was part 1 of Our Flag Means Compassion. Listen to part 2 for our sacred reading text and character blessings.